Good afternoon. Next session is about BIM360 API updates, and we have exciting news about it. And today, my name is Mikako Harada, and then today I'm going to talk with our co-speaker, the Simon B. Maybe you can talk, introduce.
I'm the software development manager for BIM360 Coordinate, which is all the products around Navisworks, Glue, and model coordination that we're going to talk to today.
Thank you. And then he is very shy. Dan here. Dan Whittle, he's a software architect, and he is the brain of the model coordinations. And he's not presenting today, but if you have a question, he is here with us. Okay? Okay, so first, so we said about ourselves, and I want to know who's in the audience. I usually try to get some idea who is here. So about the product, who knows Revit or use Revit as a product? Almost everybody. I like it. And Navisworks. Okay. And then BIM360. Good. So I think the audience knows our product. And then APIs. Who knows Revit API? Almost everybody. And then Navisworks. 1/3 maybe. And then Forge. Okay, more people in the Forge. Great. And then how about languages? C# oriented. And Node.js. Okay, so half of the people are like C#. Okay, great. Thank you very much for sharing. So Safe Harbor. Today I'm going to talk about the two main topics, model coordination and cost APIs. Both of them are not released yet. So just in case, I'm putting this one. So don't make our purchasing decisions based on our talk today, even though we are quite confident that we will make it very soon. Okay, so agenda. I'm quickly give you some overview, BIM360 overview for those, especially who didn't raise a hand with the BIM360 one, and I'll do it very quickly, followed by the model coordination API discussions, which I'm going to give a microphone to the Simon. And then I will come back and talk about the cost management APIs. So first, BIM360 overviews. So as many of you heard, there are quite a few components within a BIM360. As you can see here, there is something called Glue, Team, Docs, Field, and etc. And this blue part is part of the Forge. And more recently, we have next generation modules. For instance, model coordinations, which is like a cloud version. Some people say cloud version of Navisworks, and it's also like which is a Glue, and then also next generation model coordination, which is built on top of Docs. And then second one is the BIM360 design and design collaborations. And this is a Revit behind the scenes, and now it's integrated with the Docs. And then third component is BIM360 field management. So BIM360, there is a so-called classic BIM360 field. It's actually a completely separate product as of today. And there is another module, field management, built on top. Those two products or modules are bundled and then sold as a BIM360 build. So there is no such a product called BIM360 build. So some developer ask me, like, can I have a license for the build? Actually, when you are alien member or as a developer and want to have access to BIM360 field management, then you will need to directly ask field management or classic BIM360 field. And today, as I said, I'm going to talk about cost, which is actually an add-on on top of this BIM360 build. So if you have a default BIM360 build, build product, then it doesn't come with a cost, but you can ask for the add-on for the cost. So right now, BIM360 module has those 10. As you may see in this model coordination, I put it in the center for today, and design collaboration, etc. And the document management is a basis. It's common for across the different modules for BIM 360s, which all about saving a document and manipulating a document. And next module is a design collaboration. This one is next generation of C4R or collaboration for Revit, or we call it also BIM 360 design. And this one connects the BIM Revit cloud work sharing with the BIM 360 docs and published to the shared folders. And it also handled this, as you can see here, like a packaging and then BIM specific, especially Revit specific the features. And then today, the main topic is this model coordination. This is all about crashes, and I will leave this one to Simon shortly. And then field management. This is the ones you can manage with like issues and then checklist, etc. And another module is the project management, and this is the ones talk about handles RFIs and then submittals. We also have insight and project form. This is about like the statistics and machine learning. And this morning, during the keynotes, Jim talked about the project home. You see the image here. This is an example of developers' the application put into a small frame here. If you can, when you search the help documentation, you can find out how to hook those existing ones. If you are partners, want to connect with this one, contact us directly, because right now this is not automatic. You have to ask our engineering team in the back end to whitelist your application whitelisted. And then cost management, which I'm going to talk toward the end of this talk. And then there is a component which is common across different modules, which is issues, which is used among the document management, model coordination, field management, and design collaboration as well. So today, this model coordination team is also showing about the extended usage of the issues. And for more information, there is a help documentation and also blog about the BIM 360 release note. You can go back and then you can visit this page and then learn more about it. Okay. So now, next one is the BIM 360 and then APIs. So BIM 360 has 4G APIs, and I often use this BIM 360 as a good example of Autodesk itself is using Forge by itself. So Forge is a collection of web services which uses the Autodesk, used by the Autodesk as well. So authentication, data management, design automation, which Sasha just talked before, and then BIM 360, and so on. And among those, BIM 360 uses those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components. And for instance, the login, this is the authentication. And account management API, this is a part of BIM 360 because this is specific to BIM 360. Account admin is all about creating a project and then adding users. And data management, this is all about files. You can upload a file, download a file, and once you get to a certain model, for instance, if you are starting from the account, you can go navigate to the project and further to the folders, and then further to the folders or files. Once you get to a specific files, it's about all models. And the typical example will be the usage of the viewer. So once you have a models, you can view. This is more obvious by looking at this page, the images. Model derivative, this is about translating files. It could be translation between IFC and Revit file. And then the more obvious one is from Revit to a viewable format. You can also get the metadata out of the models. For instance, you see all the property data in the viewers. As long as you can access that in the viewer, you can do the same thing through the API using model derivative APIs. And then there are a couple of BIM360 specific API as well. Issues, one thing which we released last year, and this year soon we are going to have model coordination and cost management APIs. And these are specific to BIM360, so this falls under the BIM360 API categories. So to learn more, I listed this, the list, it's a little bit too much to read, but there are a lot of learning material. This is the ones for the all existing APIs. With that, I'm going to pass it to Simon, and then he will talk about the model coordinations.
Thanks, Mikako. Hi, I'm Simon. As I said before, I'm the engineering manager for model coordination or coordinate, BIM360 coordinate. And typically, if I'm in the audience and I see that there's the engineering manager stood up and the software architect sat down, I think, oh, this is going to be really low level, or like, simple. But what's good is that Don wrote the slides for this, so I can only mess it up. So this is a picture of our application in BIM360. And it's sort of early days, really. It's been going for about maybe 18 months, 2 years. And we've been evolving it in two ways. One with our web experience, one in the back end, which is now coming to fruition with the APIs. And I think in order to really explain model coordination, why we've built it, you want to look at the heritage of where it comes from. So we start with Navisworks, which is my teams look after. Navisworks is a desktop coordination tool. And it's really about aggregating data and what workflows you can enable downstream of that. So pulling design files together and then clashing them is an obvious one. But there are other things that you can do. You can, and you can look at data associated with that aggregate and learn from it. And through the APIs in Navisworks, you can do quite a bit. But the key is in Navisworks, and then with Glue also, what you do is you pull the data together, you look at it, and then you set up a clash test, you set the rules for that clash test, you run that clash test, and then you look at the results of that clash test. Which is interesting, and certainly with Glue, you can then store that data in the cloud and rerun those clash tests and store the results of those clash tests every time you run them, every time you do that. But what model coordination seeks to do is to run the clashes on a sort of zero tolerance basis at the point of upload. So that what you're doing then is you're filtering the results rather than rerunning the clash test each time. So the clash test is effectively run once, and you're looking at the data, and you're finding new ways and different ways to look at the data. So model coordination in BIM360 is pretty much it's aggregating the data and then looking for workflows that can exploit that downstream. We built model coordination, the product, the web app that you saw in the previous slide, API first. So everything stems from the definition of the API, and everything you see in the product is using that API. There are no backdoors or anything like that. So anything that, as a developer, you talk to our APIs with, that's the same thing that our web app is using. And as the web app evolves, that's still continuing to use those APIs. So everything that we produce will go out through Forge. The release for our APIs is we're aiming to put a private beta out at the moment. Well, that's out at the moment, and then a public beta coming out around sort of AU time. So if you want to get access to these APIs, afterwards, then you can see myself or Don or Mikako, and we can help you get access. Where does it fit? So this is a diagram that explains, roughly speaking, what happens in the coordinate application. Autodesk and Revit users, AutoCAD and Revit users, and anybody that's exporting to IFC or the main exporters to IFC can upload to BIM360 docs, and then they can leverage the capabilities of the coordinate backend, and they can run clashes or see clash results. They can also look at an aggregate of the property data that's created when you upload that data, so you can look across your project and ask questions of the property data, and that's all the BIM data that exists within your design files as it goes up into the cloud. And then you can leverage that to do some pretty exciting clash issue management. So that's formalizing the process of clash resolution. How does it work? Well, one of the things that we thought about at the very outset, and it's something that happens in Navisworks and it's something that happens in Glue, and we do it slightly different in model coordination, is you want to aggregate at various points in time. So people are uploading data all the time to their project, and what you really want to do is take a slice through and then do any analysis on that slice. And that's what we do. We create what's called a model set, and then the model set is sampled at points in time. Typically, any time anybody updates a version of their design file. So if you consider this set of, or this project perhaps, where you've got some architectural files, some structural files, and some MEP files, they're all coordinated in a model set folder. Maybe, in this case, the architect puts some new files up into the cloud. That creates another version of a model set. And then you get a version 3 if the structural engineer puts some new files up, and so on. And you're getting different slices through time, and you can analyze against those slices. And the key thing about this is that each slice or model set version is immutable. So that is a point in time, and it's fixed. So that data is fixed, and you can do work against that. You can look back in time as well, and you can see previous versions and see what happened in those previous versions. So you can track, say, the changes in the number of clashes and how those clashes have evolved over time. I'll keep coming back to clash, but it's not the only workflow that you can leverage off of this. And in truth, we will show a few more as well. In terms of actually interacting with the data, really looking across the entire project or the entire model set at any point is a bit heavyweight. Really what you might want to do is just see snapshots of that. So maybe I just want to, if I'm an architect and I want to see what I've done in the context of, say, the structure of the building, but I only want to see level 2, then really I want to create a view which is just a combined set of those files within the model set. And I can create that against a model set version, or I can see it march through time as well. So I can do that. I can create different views, and this all exists within the product. It exists within BIM360 model coordination. You can click on various tabs and see that, but it's also available through the APIs. So the other thing that you can get with a model set is, as I said before, we get this set of clash data. Every time you create a model set version, we clash everything in the model set. And you get that clash data against that model set version, and you can pull that data back. I'll go into that in more detail in a second. The other thing that we do is we index all the BIM property data. One of the things that we've always looked at with model coordination is this concept of scale. So Navisworks, right from the outset, was always about dealing with very large models and being able to view them and interact with them on any form of commodity software, hardware. And Glue also gives you that capability of dealing with very, very large numbers of design files all aggregated together. And we looked at Glue in particular as our sort of guide for how people were wanting to use coordination in the cloud. And we found that some of our customers were aggregating up to like 1,000 or 1,500 design files all into one set that they were trying to sort of coordinate. And that's a huge amount of data. And since we've built the model coordination application, that top level has increased, and we've seen even more complex systems which have doubled the size. And we see that every time we start to work with bigger and bigger projects, that the amount of data can be absolutely enormous. So everything that we do within the model coordination back end is all about dealing with huge scale. And so one of the things that we do in addition to the clash testing, is we also we index all that property data, we put it into S3 Select, and the reason for that method of doing it is really to cope with the huge amount of data that might be generated for a given project. And we allow you to query against that data. I'll show you a bit about that later. So if we focus on clash to start with, as I say, you get a clash test per model set version, and then it's all about how you get the clash results down from your model coordination. And there are 3 JSON files that you can pull down, and they relate to one another. One of the key aspects to model coordination is, and you've got to think about the workflow here, is that if I identify a clash against a particular model set version, I then, through my workflow, I want to decide whether that clash is meaningful to me or whether it's something that I can kind of ignore. So say I'm looking at light fittings against a ceiling. Maybe the clashes there are entirely intentional, and that's fine. And so I want to ignore those. And so I set an ignore group for them. And I want to make sure that any time I put any more design data up, it doesn't find those clashes and tell me about them again. So I want to put them in a different list so that I don't have to deal with them every single time I get a new set of design file. So in order to do that, I need to be able to track objects from version to version in my design files, so that I know if I can see them clashing again, they go into this bucket rather than this one. And that's quite a tough problem to solve because different file formats have different forms of object ID, and quite a lot of those object IDs can vary between versions of files. So we create our own persistent ID in the back end, which identifies an object across time in a particular file. So I create a door, it gets an object ID, and that might vary within the design file, but in our back end, that is given a single object ID, and that will stay the same. So if it's identified in a clash in version 3, it may change its object ID in the design file for version 4, but we still know that that's the same door. So our clashes are against those IDs, and that's what's reported in the clash JSON. The problem with that is that then when you want to view it, you need to be able to find the object ID that relates to a viewable. So we need some way of instancing that against the document, the view that you're looking at. And so that gives us the second file, which is the clash instance. And then you need to relate that back to the specific document that's derived from your seed file, which is your document. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail now because it's a bit confusing. So if we get into the JSON specifically, so we look at the clash file first. So you can see I've got an ID at the top there, and the ID, so at the top the scope is our model set, so that's just a GUID for that. The version is the version of the model set that I talked about previously. Then you've got the clashes, so you've got an ID for your clash, and then the clash is typically 2 objects, and the 482 and the 148, those are our persistent clash IDs. So they'll be the same from version to version to version. And then you get a distance, which is the penetration distance, and a status, which is, as you say at the bottom there, is telling you whether the clash is a new clash that you haven't seen before, whether it's existing or whether we've resolved it. And then you need to cross-reference that in order to be able to view it in LMV. So then what we do is we have a clash instance JSON file, which takes, again, the same model set version. And then I have a clash ID, which relates back. You see the ID in the clashes there is ID 1, and here the SID is 1. And then we have this concept of a left and right. So there's always a sort of left and right clashing objects. So the left is red, right is green. And in actual fact, if you view those in the application, you see the red-green color coding there. So then we have the ID for the persistent ID, which is the OID, and then we have the viewable ID, which is its lookup into the particular object ID at that point in time, that model set version. But we still don't know which document that occurred in. Documents are like views in Revit. And so you need your third file, which is the third JSON file, which then takes, for a particular clash ID, it tells you which URN for which document you're talking about. And then that allows you to bring back the appropriate viewable. Putting it all together, you can see that for a given clash with ID 1, I can see that the red object in the diagram in the bottom right-hand corner, which you would see in LMV, has a viewable ID of 3468, and I can find the particular document that that refers to. And then the green object has a viewable ID 3556, and that's from the document with ID 3 and the URN that's associated with that. So you can work back and actually create a viewing experience fairly straightforwardly. But this is all persistent data, so you can create workflows which track those clashes across time. So the key to all of this, why you're doing the clashing, is you want an issue experience. You want to be able to resolve a formal experience that will allow you to resolve your clashes. And so that ties into the BIM360 Issues API. And again, with the model coordination application, there's no backdoors. It's using the APIs as intended in the BIM360 API. So they're the same APIs that are available to you. So we can ignore clashes. We can call them not an issue, and there's an experience around that. Or we can assign them to a BIM360 issue. And you see here, this is largely how we do that. So there's an issue ID that we can track out to the issue service, and then there's a set of clash IDs, which I talked about earlier, which are in the clash file, that relate those back to the particular clashes that you saw previously. So you see how through the APIs you can kind of, or at least the JSON data, you can connect everything up in terms of the issues workflow associated with clashes that are created against a model set version. So on to another side of things that you can do with a model set version. Because we store all the BIM data associated with all the objects in a model set version in our back end, you can do SQL commands against that. And you can pretty much do most of the select functionality against our index service. The only thing you can't do is group by, but the rest are pretty much there. So you can see an example here where we're basically looking to bring back all the objects, the viewable objects in a model set version up to 50 objects, basically. And you can see here you've got the seed file version, the document version, and then the viewable ID against each object. But then you clearly, as you can see here, you've got all the viewable data, all the BIM data against those objects, which is incredibly powerful. You can do a whole bunch of things if you then cross-reference that with the clash data that you're bringing in. And that's one example of what you can do, but I'm going to show you more as well. And you can see here that this is going into that a bit more. So you can see the seed file version. For those of you who've used the APIs for LMV, the DB refers to the PDB file, which has got all the BIM data in it for that particular seed file. And then the docs are the views that you would get out of your Revit file, for instance. And then the ID is the object ID. So in summary, what have we shown? So we've got model set versions through time. Those are your immutable points through time where you can look at the data across your project. You've got clash tests against that for every model set version, which you can look through time as well and look at the change in clashes. You've got an issue resolution workflow that you can connect into the index to the issue service in BIM360. And then you've got this really powerful BIM index for every model set version, which allows you to really dig into the data and classify it. So, bringing that all together, what have we managed to do? There's a couple of sample applications. We haven't had the APIs out for very long, and we've been working with Mikako and the team around getting them out through Forge. And so we attended an accelerator in New York, and we worked with Insight VR, who are a company out in New York building a collaborative VR application. And they used our APIs to sort of see if they could integrate into their application. I'll show you that to start with. And they had like a week to integrate it, and they had some of our help. They didn't really need much of our help, really. We gave them the sample apps that Don's written, and that was pretty much enough for them to get going. And they were able to do quite a bit. I'll show you a little video here. And so this is what they did is they used a Chrome extension to add a little button in the bottom right-hand corner of the LMV, which allows you to do view in VR. And when they click it, it basically exports all the data for the clash to their VR application. And you can see, just as a simple thing, you've got the two parts that are clashing there that they've exported from that view. And there's a guy who's looking at them, and he can mark them up then, and he can do various things collaboratively to sort of review that clash. As an academic exercise, that was pretty good for like maybe a couple of days' work. And this was basically the presentation they did at the end of the accelerator. Now, it's not that useful, really, to just see those clashes in this way, even if it is immersive and a little bit interesting. What's more interesting is if you can show that clash in context, like we do in the application. So you want to pull all the other data in as well. And at the end of this video, you can see that they also managed to pull all the associated data around that clash into their application. So even in that week, they managed to do that much with our APIs. And they were starting to explore some of the more advanced side of things as well. So this is him just picking out another clash. And you see there that you've got all the contextual data, which they just, for simple rendering purposes, they just created as sort of ghosted, semi-transparent objects. But you could do something a bit better than that. So they managed that in certainly less than a week. They had to sort of disappear for one of the days because, you know, this SME, so they had a bunch of stuff they needed to do as well to keep their product going. So that was pretty exciting to see them do that. And then there's some work that Don did. So in writing our sample applications, just to sort of show people how to use the product, Don integrated some of the data into Power BI. And really, Don and I had a conversation about this on the train over today. And really, we want to be a bit clear about what we're showing here, particularly in the context of the next thing I'm going to show you. This is really just visualizing the data in Power BI. So we've pulled it all out from the index service for a particular model set version, and we're just looking at it in Power BI. And you can see here we've got a pivot table, and we're able to look at the data that we've generated in different ways. And you can see that the numbers in there are related to the number of clashes. So we can also do some sort of graphical representation. On the left-hand side, it's your primary objects. Remember, I had the left and right objects. So on the left-hand side, you've got the primary objects. On the right-hand side are the objects that are clashing with those objects. And you can select, say, structural framing, and then it'll show you on the right-hand side, it'll show you the coloring. It'll say what it's clashing with. So this is kind of just an example of how you can very quickly create some really interesting visualizations of your clash data across a model set version. And Don played with a whole bunch of things here. I want to be really clear that everything I'm showing you in this particular demo here is available, all the code for it and everything is available as part of the sample apps that we'll make available to you. And I'll talk a bit about them in a minute as well. And then one of the other folks that we work with in Autodesk, Xiaodong, went a step further, and he really liked what Don had done with the Power BI integration, and I think Mikako encouraged him a little bit to integrate that more directly with a Forge viewer experience. And so this demo shows what Xiaodong created pretty quickly, I think, as well. So you can see you've got LMV there, and you can see we've got essentially a model set version, and there's a Power BI integration there, and he's using Power BI to really navigate his way through those clashes. Just above the Power BI part, you can see the classic matrix view telling you there are 719 clashes between Audubon structure and Audubon architecture. And essentially that's what we're looking at here, a breakdown of that interaction. So this is basically just using all the public APIs to view this. And so this Xiaodong was working against the samples that Don put out and basically building out as he wanted. We didn't know too much about what Xiaodong was doing until he presented to us. It was really exciting to see. And then he's exported a bunch of data out to Excel there. So here he's taking each of the clash groups, and he's then going into the issues experience. You can see the pinpoints for the issues there, and he can see those in the viewer as well. So this is the full workflow. You can see that there's not much more that you would see in the model coordination API, in the model coordination web app, than what you're seeing here. In fact, in many areas, there's more here than what you'd see in our web app with that Power BI integration. So the opportunities for API developers or for third-party developers is pretty good. So very quickly, what are we presenting out for people? So we're making available a set of .NET NuGet packages, some JavaScript Node.js packages as well that allow you to talk to our APIs. There is already a set of documentation that Don's written for all of this. It's pretty extensive, lots of lovely diagrams and words and things. And then a really extensive set of code samples which take you through everything from just setting up as if you haven't done anything, so authenticating against our endpoints and then working with them and doing some pretty advanced stuff. And that even includes, as you see there, the Power BI integration and also the integration with the issues service. A couple of things that to bear in mind for our first release is currently it's only 3.0 access, and we can't get around it. The API access requires an initial model coordination admin setup. There is a component of that you're going to have to do. The other thing is that currently there's no webhooks against the new model set version, so you have to poll that endpoint. However, that as our product evolves, you'll start to do that. And I should pass you off to Mikako for the next set.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Okay. So next, cost management. Cost management API is relatively, technically speaking, or maybe I would say theoretically speaking, it's relatively straightforward. There is an association between UI and an API. So for instance, in a budget page, looks like a left side has the corresponding endpoint on the right side. So I'm not going to go into too much details, but probably it's more obvious just looking at the documentations. But what I wanted to point is we have a budget portion exposed, and then contract portion, and then also change order part. Change order has a little bit more granular APIs, but we already have this. And then developer resources, similar to what Simon was showing for model coordination, we also have a documentations more or less ready, but we still need to review. And then also code samples. My team, the Tom, actually created the samples, which I will be showing shortly. And two samples. One is export and import, and the other one is integration with the viewer. And known issues and limitations, the phased approach. So the cost team is saying that they are not going to release 100% at once. So for instance, in the project management, you have to have some initial template setting. That part may come later, but the initial the application, the access to the document in each project should be there. We also have the wishes which the people want to have a project setting automatically. But in order to do that, we have a little limitation. For instance, getting project members and then activating cost services by API, which is actually very common ones, even not just the cost API, but beyond cost API as well. So we are hoping that the admin API will be available shortly as well, because internal people are also asking. And sample applications, so the Sigma, this is the one Jim Quancy showed very quickly this morning, and the similar videos. And the Sigma estimate has already Revit add-ins, and using models like shown here. They have the integrations in a BIM. And on the left side, you see the BIM360 project listing. And from there, you have connections. And then eventually, the cost estimate values will be synced to the BIM360 as well. So in this case, it's showing the estimate here under the Insight tab. And then next, then they're showing the budget. And this budget data will be synced with BIM360. Okay, so I think now next one will be BIM360 under the Autodesk tab. And so this one goes to the BIM360. Okay, so the data from the Sigma estimate is all filling up. So that means that there is an API already here in a post, or the right API is here. And this one is also linked with the viewer as well. And now it's connecting with the viewer. So the next one is TNM, time and the material tracking. And this one is quite attractive because it has a connection with mobile. So the trade or subcontractor is entering time and materials in mobile, and you do the signing and then everything in the mobile, and then submit to the GC. And GC also does that in the same environment, but in a web application. And then after that, it will be synced to another GC's application, which is a BIM360 cost. So this one is showing some handwritten signatures, and then the syncing with the GC's one. So once you get the GC's approval, which go to another system, which is a BIM. So this is the document, PDF document. And I'm actually skipping this video for the GC signing up part. But then once you go to submitting to the GCs, it goes to the BIM360. It was actually a very long video that I shortened this. And now you can see this is a BIM360s, and then they are showing a detail where you can show the attachment. So again, this means that you can attachment API is already there as well. So this is the ones the system is created and connected with the BIM 360. And then another example of Boomi. So this is the one which is not really attractive in terms of the end user view, but it has the connectors, data connectors. Boomi is actually acquired by the Dell, and they provide the connections. So Boomi actually has data connectors with various ERP systems. And they have some UIs to map between two systems. And this one is showing how to map between two. So in this case, it's connecting with BIM 360 cost module and then SAP. And later on, I'm actually hoping you can maybe show it. Okay, sorry, I just put it. But later on, you will see the mapping between the project and versus individual data or properties mapping as well. And the next one is done by my team, and export and import. And this is quite obvious. You just take all the data from from BIM 360 and then export to CSV. And modify something and then input, similar to what design automation for Revit example was showing, Sasha was showing before that. In fact, the same developer wrote these samples. Okay. For the interest of time, I'm just skipping this one. And then another one is integration with the viewer. You can easily imagine that if you have a model, you want to extract some data, especially like a geometry, the volume and then areas. So in this case, there is an integration with the viewer, and then also design automation for Revit. Behind the scenes, this application is actually calling a Revit in the cloud and calculating volumes they need, and then showing this on the right side as well. Okay, so what's next? The both cost management and the model coordination API, we are in a private beta, and hopefully soon we are kind of targeting the end of this year, hopefully like AU Las Vegas time, to have public betas. And we still have a little fine tuning to do. But we are hoping to have it very soon. So at that time, we'll be open that API to whole public, and then to all partners, and then get the feedback, and then we'll continue working. And then sometime next year, hopefully, the public release. At that time, we'll have more fixed APIs. So any changes will be versioned and etc. And then post-release, Simon was actually already talking about enhancement they want to do by the mid next year as well. So there is a lot of ideas for enhancement. So we are going to release. So once it's released, we are going to the update periodically and in a much shorter intervals. So the accelerators, we have Autodesk Cloud Accelerator almost every month nowadays. This period is a little bit busy, but usually we have one or two. So if you are interested in having a hand-on, then submit a proposal, and then we may be able to get together, just like the Insight BR has done with us. So if you are interested in, feel free to contact us. And right now we have 3 lined up. Probably the one next week is too close, but the one in San Francisco might be a good one. And after that, we actually already have some plans. We just didn't fix the date, but approximately once a month we have it. If you want to have something near you and you are confident to host or get the people, then we may consider that too. So don't assume that we are always defining. It's actually defined by the demand as well. Okay, so with this, any questions?